The late-night air hung heavy over the Chicago suburbs. Block after block of split-level and ranch houses was swallowed by shadow, punctuated only by the weak yellowish haze of streetlights solitary, flickering torches against the vast, indifferent darkness. The chill of the evening, smelling faintly of wet earth and lingering traces of the afternoon rain, seeped through window cracks. It was a silence that wasn't peaceful, but profoundly lonely. Inside a modest two-story wooden house, the glow from the living room cast long, distorted silhouettes on the walls. John sat on a worn, familiar sofa, his hands tightly cupped around a mug of still-steaming coffee. The warmth was a fleeting, physical comfort, utterly failing to penetrate the cold knot of anxiety in his chest. With every careful sip, he felt like he was desperately trying to hold on to a brief, fragile moment of stillness amidst a rising tide of worry, confusion, and raw fear. Outside, the steady rhythm of the rain hitting the roof mixed with the whisper of the wind whistling through the eaves. It was a mournful, solitary soundtrack that played over and over, a relentless reminder that time was moving, indifferent to his paralysis. The methodical tick-tock of the grandfather clock in the hall was a percussive beat, underscoring the weight of the decision he was about to make, a decision that felt heavy, enough to reshape his entire life. John replayed the sharp, agonizing conversation he'd had with Emma a few nights ago. Emma, with her striking blonde hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea, was the one person he had ever trusted implicitly, but her words, a cruel mix of sweetness and accusation, still echoed in his mind, twisting his gut. How did everything get this complicated? How did we get here? He asked the empty room, knowing no answer would come. He set the mug down, his gaze fixed on the streaks of rain running down the window pane. For a brief, dislocated moment, fragments of his childhood flooded his consciousness. The sun-drenched summers at the beaches near Lake Michigan, the booming laughter of friends, endless games of driveway basketball with his older brother, and the innocent, long-forgotten promises he'd made to himself. He realized that even now, with his life feeling like a tangled knot, those memories remained his only safe harbor, a small, inviolable territory of peace. The sudden vibration of his phone on the end table ripped him back to the present. He flinched, his heart hammering against his ribs. It was Emma. Her name on the screen felt like a physical weight. Part of him wanted to snatch it up immediately, desperate for contact, while the rest was paralyzed by dread. He knew this call could be the final pivot point, the moment of resolution, or the beginning of a final, irreversible break. After a tense few seconds of internal debate, John let it ring out, placing it face down. He needed to be ready. He pushed himself up, his body stiff, and walked over to the window. He peered out at the desolate street. Only the occasional late-night car zipped past, leaving bright red taillight trails on the slick, black asphalt. A stray black cat padded silently across the lawn, paused for a moment as if watching him, and then dissolved into the deep shadow under the oak tree. John gave a hollow, mirthless chuckle, recognizing the strange, small ways mundane occurrences could shift the immense weight of human emotion. Returning to the sofa, he sank back down, placing a hand over his eyes and drawing a long, deliberate breath. Each inhale was an attempt to anchor himself against the internal storm. His thoughts drifted to work, the unfinished projects, the looming deadlines, and then spiraled backward to his past mistakes, both recent and distant. It all fused into a profound weariness, a fatigue he knew he couldn't simply sleep off. The rain intensified, becoming a heavy downpour punctuated by the distant, low growl of thunder. John felt his pulse quicken, his own internal rhythm syncopated with the drumming of the storm. He understood the undeniable truth. He couldn't keep running. The decision before him demanded a full frontal confrontation with Emma, with his own conscience, and with the messy fallout he still hadn't fully acknowledged. He remembered meeting Emma for the first time at a tiny, pretentious coffee shop downtown. She was sitting by the window, engrossed in a novel, sipping a perfectly crafted cappuccino. Her eyes, when they finally met his, sparkled with an intelligent, compelling curiosity. He was instantly captivated, not just by her undeniable beauty, but by the way she made him feel seen, listened to, and truly important. From that moment, his equilibrium had shifted. Every choice, every action, seemed to be defined by her presence in his world. But looking back now, John saw the brutal complexity of love. It wasn't a straight line. It was a labyrinth of conflicting desires, painful misunderstandings, and moments of utter, terrifying confusion. He felt suspended between two possible fates, one path leading toward a hopeful, hard-won happiness, the other plunging into profound disappointment and isolated solitude. John sighed. picked up the phone, and looked at the screen one last time. A part of him was desperate to text her, "We need to talk, right now." But the wiser, more cautious part insisted he needed to gather his strength, to organize the chaos of his thoughts before wading into that necessary, final conversation. He turned toward the cluttered desk in the corner. Papers, notebooks, and crumpled post-it notes lay scattered across the surface. Each sheet was a fragment of his life plans, aspirations, anxieties, and bills. John slowly began to sort them, an involuntary act of trying to impose order on his internal disorder. With every piece of paper he touched, he remembered a specific moment, a consequential choice, or a forgotten promise. Outside the window, the rain continued its barrage, but the lamplight, refracting through the countless drops clinging to the glass, created a shimmering, softening effect. A flicker of hope ignited within him. No matter how brutal the road ahead might be, he recognized he still had the chance to salvage, to face the music, and perhaps, eventually, to find peace. He returned to the sofa, sitting back down and resting his hand back on the now cool coffee mug. He closed his eyes, listening to the rain, listening to the frantic but steady beat of his own heart. The crucial moment was imminent, but he felt, for the first time that night, marginally more prepared. His mind drifted to his family, his parents, his brother, the people who had always been his foundation, his unwavering support. He wondered if they would be proud of him now, or if they'd see him as having completely lost his way. Childhood vignettes flashed, his dad patiently guiding him through complicated math problems, his brother's late-night stories about college life. These memories served as a vital reminder that despite the current darkness, he had a bedrock, a place to stand and start rebuilding. He picked up the phone again, staring at the screen, but still didn't dial. Instead, he quietly opened a notepad app and typed a short, stark entry. "Tonight, I face it. Scared, unsure, but I will not run anymore." The act of committing the thought to writing was a small, crucial release, of fractional lessening of the burden he carried. For the next few minutes, John sat in the silence, watching the storm, breathing deeply, acutely aware of every sound. Every drop of rain, every gust of wind, was a tangible expression of life moving forward. A solemn reminder that this night would pass, and he needed to meet it. The next morning, the weak Chicago sunlight filtered through the sheer bedroom curtains, but John felt none of its warmth. He was still submerged in the heavy, chilling residue of the night before. His morning coffee sat untouched on the kitchen counter, its steam rising in a lazy coil, but John was oblivious to the heat. Every thought was a vicious loop centered on Emma and the undeniable, paralyzing decisions he could no longer postpone. John needed motion, a physical reset. He grabbed his old, long gray coat, the one that had seen him through to Midwest winters, and stepped outside, inhaling the cold morning air. The crunch of dry leaves under his worn sneakers, the faint, distant calls of sparrows, and the lingering scent of dew on the ground created a strange, intense quiet. He reasoned that if he walked long enough, far enough, his mind would clear itself enough to face the inevitable. As he cut through the local park, Humboldt Park, perhaps, or one of the smaller community green spaces, memories of walking here with Emma struck him like a physical blow. Simple moments, a shared glance over a dog walker, an argument about the best route to the lake, now felt profound and desperately missed, tightening the knot in his chest. He looked at the empty park benches, the ancient silent trees, and realized everything external was exactly as it had been. Only he had changed, trapped in a self-made mess he couldn't navigate. He pulled out his phone and dialed his best friend. Mike, who had been John's rock through college and countless low points, was his last, best hope for objective advice. The moment Mike answered, he detected the tremor in John's voice. "You okay, John? Seriously, what's going on?" The simple question felt heavy, almost accusatory. John tried to sound casual. "Yeah, I'm fine. You just gotta process some stuff." The call ended, but John felt no relief. Instead, his sense of disorientation intensified. Should I call Emma now? He debated, or let things breathe. The question cycled endlessly, paralyzing his ability to focus on anything else. He rounded the final corner toward his street and stopped dead. Emma's beat-up, dark blue sedan was parked directly in front of his house, a sight he had absolutely not expected. His heart slammed against his ribs, and his stomach lurched. He pushed the front door open just as Emma was stepping out of her car. Her face was set, grim, but her eyes were raw with barely contained emotion. John knew, with chilling certainty, that whatever happened next would define the fate of their relationship. Emma strode toward him, her gaze locked on his. "We need to talk, John," she said. Her voice was level, almost dangerously calm, yet rigid with purpose. That simple statement instantly froze the air between them. John simply nodded, a surge of adrenaline, part anxiety, part strange anticipation, coursing through his body. They settled onto the sofa in the living room, the same spot where John had spent the tormented hours the night before. Emma began recounting the past few weeks, detailing the accumulated disappointment, the isolation, and the profound hurt she had been carrying. John listened, every word a shard of glass in his memory. He understood that any explanation he offered had to be honest, transparent, and unflinching. As Emma spoke, John replayed the exact moments he'd allowed their relationship to fracture, the forgotten promises, the ignored late-night texts, the times he chose professional ambition over her emotional security. The sheer weight of his neglect felt like a physical burden on his shoulders. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaled, and then met her gaze. "I'm so sorry, Emma. Hurting you was the last thing I ever wanted." Emma didn't immediately respond. She just looked at him, her expression a complex mixture of pain and probing scrutiny. The silence stretched a thick, palpable tension where both of them felt the sting and the tentative sincerity of the moment. Yet, the underlying fear, the black shadow, neither could instantly dismissed or lingered. After a moment, John rose, pacing restlessly across the wooden floor, running a frustrated hand through his hair. He knew that fixing this required concrete action, not just inadequate words. He glanced out the window and saw the morning sun finally beginning to pierce through the dense tree cover, creating flickering slivers of light. It was a visual reminder, even in the deepest mess, there was always a possibility for a fresh start. Emma stood up and walked toward the small sliding door leading to the deck, taking a deep, shuddering breath of the cold air. John followed, standing close but not touching, sensing her vulnerability. He gently reached out and placed his hand over hers, a small, silent gesture loaded with regret, a desperate plea for forgiveness, and a fragile thread of hope. They stood in silence for several minutes, hearing only the whisper of the wind and the rustle of leaves. John realized this wasn't the end. It was the brutal, necessary beginning, a raw, honest dialogue, an actual opening up. He felt a sliver of relief, even knowing the magnitude of the challenges still ahead. Emma turned her head to look at him, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her lips. It was a sign of flickering green light, indicating she was willing to take the next step with him, despite the enormous uncertainty. John returned the smile, his heart heavy with determination. They walked back inside to the kitchen, preparing another pot of coffee, this time together. John looked at Emma, the familiar affection mixed with the lingering sadness in her eyes, and grasped the truth. Love wasn't just joy. It was accountability, patience, and the courage to face all the ugly parts. Side dash by dash side dot. As John poured the coffee, his thoughts drifted momentarily to his work, his pending projects. But now the pressure felt less crushing. He knew that with the foundation of their relationship stabilized, every other difficulty would be that much easier to tackle. He exhaled a long breath, smiled slightly, and felt his mind quiet down for the first time in days. Emma sat down, looked across the counter at him, and reached out, placing her hand gently over his. "I'll try, John, together, okay?" John nodded, his resolve settling firmly within him. "Okay, Emma, together." The chirping birds outside, the sunlight filtering through the trees, the light wind across the roof, it all signaled a hesitant new chapter. John felt the immense release, yet he understood that the journey was just beginning, and he was ready to face it, one careful step at a time, with Emma. Midday in downtown Chicago. The sunlight slanted sharply between the imposing glass and steel towers, reflecting off the surface of Lake Michigan, which shimmered like polished steel. John and Emma decided to walk, needing the open air and the anonymity of the city to tackle their deeper issues. They wore heavy coats against the lake's raw, penetrating chill. Their hands were linked, but John's anxiety still coiled tightly in his gut. He knew this walk wasn't just a stroll. It was the final, critical negotiation of their relationship. Every unresolved conflict, every suppressed emotion, was poised to surface. John's heart pounded, its rhythm matching their synchronized steps on the damp paving stones, where stray yellow leaves skittered in the breeze. "When are you going to tell me everything, John?" Emma asked, her voice steady but underscored by tension. The simple question felt like a high-pressure interrogation. He took a deep, fortifying breath, trying to anchor himself. "I want to right now, but I need to organize my thoughts. It's more complicated than you realize." Emma paused, then spoke softly. "I'm braced for it, John. Whatever it is, I need the truth." Her statement brought a wave of both relief and dread. He was terrified that the truth, the full extent of his scruples, might be too much for her to bear. But he knew silence would be the ultimate poison. They walked along the lakefront path, where the deep blue water mirrored the vast, slightly overcast sky. A sharp, cold gust of wind whipped their hair, and John felt a fresh pang in his chest. He stopped, turning to face Emma, looking directly into her eyes. "Emma, I have to be completely honest. There's something I haven't told you, and it's big. It affects everything between us." He held his gaze, her eyes a mix of concern and simmering fear. "I'm ready to hear it, John. I'm not going anywhere." John sighed, his hand trembling slightly as he tightened his grip on hers. He started at the beginning, the cascade of poor professional decisions, the financial strain he hadn't disclosed, the conflicts that had led them to drift apart, creating the deep emotional chasm between them. Each word he spoke felt like a confession, a self-inflicted wound. But he knew the agony of silence was worse. Emma listened intently, nodding occasionally, but her eyes slowly filled with unshed tears. John saw the pain etching itself onto her face, regardless of her understanding. He continued, admitting his own feelings of helplessness, the gnawing fear, and the desperate urges he'd had to simply pack up and run from the whole mess. When John finally stopped, a profound silence enveloped them, broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the seawall and the wind whistling through the city landscape. Emma stepped closer, holding his hands tight, her voice shaky. "I know I could feel how much you were carrying, but why, John? Why didn't you just tell me sooner?" John lowered his head, choked by emotion. "I was scared everything would change, scared you would leave, scared I'd hurt you more by admitting it." He looked up, seeing the tears tracing paths down Emma's cheeks. A feeling of painful relief washed over him. Finally, the toxic secret was out. Emma pulled him into a fierce embrace. "We're getting through this together, John. But from now on, no more secrets. Promise me." John nodded into her shoulder, feeling the tight knot in his heart finally beginning to unravel. After a few minutes, they broke apart and continued their walk, discussing trivial things, the strange architecture, the upcoming baseball season, small plans for the following week. John realized that sometimes a simple, honest conversation and a strong hug were enough to start the slow, arduous process of healing. But life rarely offers a clean slate. As they approached the city bus line to head back to the suburbs, John's phone buzzed with a call from his office. He answered, and the stressed voice of his senior partner immediately cut through the background noise. "John, we have a code read situation. The North Star project you were heading up has hit a major legal snag. We need you in the boardroom right now." John's pulse spiked. He looked at Emma, his expression a mixture of panic and apology. I have to go deal with this. It's critical." Emma nodded, her eyes full of weary understanding. "I know. Go, John. I'll go back to the house and wait." John jumped into a taxi, the weight of immediate professional crisis piling onto the fragile peace he'd just found. He sped through the traffic-logged streets, the harsh rushing pulse of Chicago contrasting sharply with the brief calm he'd shared with Emma. "I have to balance everything," he told himself. The job, the relationship, the responsibility. Arriving at the towering corporate HQ, John found the situation far worse than he imagined. Partners were shouting, clients were threatening lawsuits, and the entire project was teetering on the brink of collapse. He took one last deep breath in the hallway, walked into the tense boardroom, and looked squarely at the assembled, panicked faces. "All right, people, let's focus. We solve this one problem at a time," he said, his voice calm, firm, and authoritative. As he plunged into the intense problem-solving, John recognized that the pressure wasn't just external. It was fueled by the emotional turmoil he'd just experienced. His heart still ached from the raw honesty with Emma, but he knew he couldn't let his guard down now. He had to be sharp, navigating the corporate minefield while holding on to his recent emotional clarity. The afternoon evaporated in a blur of intense meetings and brutal decisions. But by late evening, John and his team managed to hammer out a temporary solution, pulling the project back from the edge. Sweat trickled down his temples, his heart still racing, but he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. He had met the challenge, both professionally and emotionally. Stepping out of the skyscraper and into the cool night air, John pulled out his phone and messaged Emma, "I'm done. Heading home now. Thank you for waiting." Her reply was instantaneous. "I always believed in you. See you soon." John smiled, a wave of relief and deep affection washing over him. On the drive back, watching the hurried crowds and the glare of taillights reflecting on the wet pavement, John realized that life would always be challenging, But when you face those challenges honestly and share the burden with the person who truly matters, everything becomes bearable. He pulled up to the house and opened the door to find Emma standing in the foyer, a soft, welcoming smile on her face. They embraced, and John silently promised himself, no matter what struggles lie ahead, we will face them together. That evening, a thin, moody fog rolled over Chicago, dampening the city's light. Yellow street lamps cast hazy halos on the wet pavement, creating streaks of blurred, cold light. John finally returned home after the brutal day of corporate pressure, the exhaustion heavy on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He walked into the living room where Emma sat reading, her gaze focused, but a shadow of worry still lingered on her face. "That was intense," John said, his voice low and strained, trying to maintain a semblance of control. Emma set her book aside, offering a thin, tired smile. "I figured, but you're okay. I'm proud of you for handling it." John nodded, but the sense of reprieve was incomplete. He knew that even though they had begun to mend, the real test was far from over. One small misstep, one hurried decision, and the fragile structure they were rebuilding could collapse. Emma rose and walked toward him, her expression hardening with purpose. "John, I spoke to Mike today. He mentioned you brought up something about me not being involved in your work. What's going on?" John froze. He knew this was the unavoidable moment. The long-delayed reckoning with the core issue, the tension between his career and their life together. He sank onto the sofa next to Emma, taking her hand. I was wrong to hold that back. The pressure at work has been insane, and I wanted to shield you from it, but I see now that keeping you in the dark was a mistake." Emma took a sharp breath, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and disappointment. "John, you don't get to make that choice for me. I have the right to choose what I take on. If you can't trust me to handle your reality, then how can we move forward?" John bowed his head, a searing pain in his chest. He realized that while he had confessed the surface issues, the act of deliberate exclusion had created a deeper, more corrosive wound. He stayed silent, allowing Emma the space to articulate her hurt. Emma stood up, pacing restlessly across the room, her hands slightly shaking, her voice taut with strain. "I don't want to lose you, John, but you have to understand that love isn't just protection. It's trust, it's shared burden, and it's facing things together." John tracked her every movement, the weight crushing his chest. Every word she spoke was an agonizing reminder of the consequences of his actions. He inhaled deeply, walked to her, and grasped her hands firmly. "I understand. I will try harder. I don't want to lose you either. I promise I'll change, starting now." Emma sat down, tears finally escaping and running down her cheeks. John gently wiped them away with his thumb, his own heart aching but filled with a new resolve. "I know words aren't enough. I will show you with action." But just as they found a moment of fragile equilibrium, the phone rang. John glanced at the screen. His company's name flashed in bright letters. He answered, and his senior partner's voice, harsh and demanding, cut through the quiet. "John, we just uncovered a severe error in the financial projections for the North Star deal. If this isn't fixed immediately, we're looking at catastrophic loss. Get in here now." John's heart hammered. A cold sweat broke out on his back. He looked at Emma, his eyes a mix of apology and utter dread. "I have to go. This is an emergency." Emma nodded, though her voice trembled. "Go, I get it. But call me, John. Even just a text." He scrambled into his car, driving fast through the familiar streets. A light drizzle began to fall, the wet pavement reflecting the headlights, creating a beautiful yet cold urban landscape. Inside him, the corporate pressure was immense, colliding violently with the delicate, unresolved emotional chaos with Emma. At the office, John immediately launched into an emergency meeting. Reports and documents were piled high, colleagues were wired and tense. The situation demanded his absolute, total focus. Yet, in the back of his mind, the image of Emma standing alone in their quiet living room was a persistent, painful distraction. The meeting dragged on for hours. John made critical decisions, correcting the near-fatal project flaw, constantly coordinating calls and sending rapid-fire messages to stakeholders across different time zones. It was a corporate hurricane, leaving him utterly spent. Mid-crisis, his phone vibrated. It was a text from Emma. "I believe in you, but don't forget yourself." He stared at the words, his eyes stinging with fatigue and emotion. Despite the exhaustion, he felt a powerful surge of spiritual strength from her, a lifeline that allowed him to keep fighting. The work was temporarily stabilized in the pre-dawn hours. John drove home, the rain having stopped, the streets slick and gleaming under the pale streetlights. He walked in and saw Emma standing near the door. She must have been waiting up, her coat slightly damp from stepping outside, a strand of hair clinging to her cheek. They just looked at each other, silent. John walked to her and took her hands. "I'm done. For now." Emma smiled softly, but her eyes were still shadowed with worry. "I know, but John, you have to learn to balance this. Otherwise we'll be stuck in this vicious cycle forever." John sighed, sinking onto the sofa and pulling Emma into his arms. They sat in silence, hearing only the methodical tick-tock of the clock and the faint breeze outside. John finally understood that no matter how harsh the demands of work and life were, love required patience, genuine understanding, and the courage to face every single challenge head-on. But before he could savor the peace, his phone chimed with an email notification from a crucial international partner. The subject line was chilling. A force majeure clause was being invoked. The contents warned of catastrophic project failure unless immediate, drastic measures were taken. John's heart hammered against his ribs. A cold dread washed over him. He realized this was the biggest test yet. He had to save his career-defining project and protect his fragile relationship with Emma. John looked at Emma, his eyes pleading. "I need a few more hours. I have to go back and handle this." Emma nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "Go, John, I trust you. Just promise you'll come back." John rushed out to his car, driving back into the misty Chicago night. In his mind, stress and determination warred fiercely. He knew life wasn't offering him a break. Every decision now carried profound consequences for his job, for his love, and for the kind of man he was choosing to become. The late Chicago night was stark. Street lights cast wet, lonely reflections on the asphalt. John pulled up to his house, the weariness of a long, stressful day heavy in his limbs. He knew the tension was still thick. The fate of his project and his relationship with Emma were both hanging in the balance. Emma was standing near the door, her eyes shadowed with concern. "That was a brutal day, wasn't it?" John asked, his voice low. "It was, but you're okay, John. I'm proud of you," Emma replied, though the anxiety never truly left her eyes. Just as a sliver of peace appeared, John's phone shrieked. It was his senior partner. "John, massive system failure. We need you back now." John's heart hammered. This was the moment of impossible choice. Execute the high-risk, high-reward fix, or accept catastrophic financial loss for a safer exit. He sped back to the office chaos. Colleagues were frantic. Critical client data was corrupted. John immediately took command. He split the team, ordered the high-risk protocol, and began coordinating the rescue. The pressure was immense, driving his heart rate through the roof. Amid the frantic urgency, he received a simple text from Emma. "I trust you. Don't forget to eat." The message was a sudden, warm punch to his gut, reminding him what he was fighting for. The night became a blur of frantic action. John drove the team relentlessly. Calls, code checks, damage control. Every decision was a life-or-death moment for the project. Finally, as dawn approached, the project was temporarily salvaged. John collapsed onto his desk, utterly spent, a fragile wave of relief washing over him. But as he gathered his things, Mike called. "John, Emma had a little accident at the house. Come home now." John didn't think. He just drove, accelerating hard through the quiet streets. He found Emma on the sofa, her ankle crudely bandaged, forcing a shaky smile. "I didn't want to bother you, but it hurts," she admitted. John knelt beside her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Emma, for making you go through that alone." Emma held his hand firmly. "I know you're trying, but John, you have to find the balance. Work and us." John looked at her, his eyes stinging with tears of exhaustion and love. "I promise I won't leave you alone again. We'll get through this, together." They sat in silence, the gentle yellow light from the city filtering through the windows, creating a fragile peace after the storm. John knew the immediate crisis had passed, but the true challenge, the one defining his life, was just beginning, and he was ready to face it, with Emma. The next morning, Chicago was veiled in a soft, misty haze. The first rays of sunlight pierced the skyscraper canyons, reflecting off Lake Michigan in shimmering, hopeful streaks. John woke up, bone-tired but mentally lighter after the long, grueling night. Emma was in the kitchen, brewing coffee. Her calm eyes and gentle smile brought John an immediate, profound sense of peace. "Rough night, huh?" John asked, his voice low but warm. Emma offered a faint smile, placing a mug of coffee in front of him. "Yeah, but we're both still here. That's what matters most." John settled onto the chair, meeting her gaze. He felt the weight of her patience and the depth of her love. He knew that after surviving such intense pressure, only love and mutual understanding could sustain them. After a quiet breakfast, John made the necessary calls to his team. Colleagues reported that the situation, while stable, required careful monitoring and significant cleanup. John methodically created a detailed action plan, delegated tasks, and ensured all critical stakeholders were informed. Even while dealing with the fallout, John recognized the lingering stress. The project was still in a highly sensitive phase, but he had, through sheer necessity, learned to compartmentalize a balance between work and personal life he had tragically ignored until now. In the afternoon, John and Emma ventured out for a walk in Lincoln Park, a favorite spot. The air was crisp, and golden leaves drifted onto the paths. The peaceful atmosphere, the distant bird calls, and the gentle breeze soothed the ragged edges of their recent trauma. Going through that kind of pressure makes you realize what the hell really matters, John admitted, squeezing Emma's hand tightly. It's not success or failure on some balance sheet, it's you. It's your presence. Emma smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. I learned that too. No matter how harsh life gets, if we face it together, we can weather anything. Returning home, they shared the simple ritual of cleaning up and preparing dinner. John, taking the initiative, started cooking pasta task he rarely undertook while Emma helped with the vegetables and meat prep. In the small warm glow of the kitchen, the rhythmic sounds of chopping and the rich aroma of the food created a deeply intimate atmosphere. After dinner, they settled onto the sofa, looking out at the city lights. John took her hands in his voice earnest. I know there are more challenges ahead, but from this moment on, I promise I will never let any secret or any amount of external pressure come between us again. Emma leaned her head onto his shoulder, letting out a deep sigh of relief. I believe you, and I will always be here for you, no matter what happens. They held the silence, cherishing the quiet moment. John understood that true emotional resolution wasn't just words. It was consistent patience, deliberate care, and tangible action. Love, he realized, was the ultimate defense against the harshness of the outside world. Later that night, John received a follow-up call from the international partner. The project was back on track, and the bugs were officially contained. He let out a long, shuddering sigh, but immediately he recognized that pressure never vanishes entirely. It only becomes manageable when you learn to share and manage it. Emma looked at him, her voice soft. I know you've been through hell. Now, take a break. We deserve this peace. John nodded, pulling her into a tight, grateful hug. He understood that the cleanup wasn't just fixing the code. It was restoring their emotional connection and rebuilding mutual understanding. They spent the rest of the night talking, laughing softly, and simply holding each other on the sofa, the yellow city lights casting a dreamy, soft glow across the room. They made small plans for the coming days, not just work schedules, but small, precious, ordinary things, before finally going to bed. John opened his journal and wrote a final entry. Pressure can be crushing, and the challenge is brutal, but love and true understanding will always pull you through. With Emma, I'm no longer afraid. Emma stood beside him, read the last line, and smiled. We're moving forward, John, together. I'm not leaving. Early morning in Chicago, sunlight filtered through the brilliantly colored autumn foliage near Lincoln Park. The air was cool and crisp, carrying a profound sense of stillness after the preceding week's storms. John woke up and walked to the window, inhaling deeply. Everything felt reorganized, his mind was clear, his heart was at peace. Emma entered the room, holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. Her eyes held a gentle serenity, and her soft smile pulled an answering smile from John. Good morning, John. Sleep well. Better than I have in months. Everything feels like it's finally settled, John replied, his voice deep and content. They sat together on the small balcony, watching the early commuters and the sun glinting off the high-rises. The quiet intimacy was profound. John felt the deep connection forged not in easy times, but through shared struggle, trust, and the painful patience they had shown each other. That day, John dedicated his time to strategically restructuring his work life. He held a focused team meeting, clearly delegated responsibilities, and established strict boundaries for his offers. John had realized that peace wasn't solely a gift from love. It was earned through discipline and a controlled work-life balance. In the afternoon, John and Emma took a long walk along the Lake Michigan shoreline. The small waves lapped gently against the bank, the gulls cried overhead, and the afternoon sun created a scene of perfect tranquility. They fully absorbed the value of simple, unburdened living. I've learned one thing, John said, taking Emma's hand and holding it securely. Before, I always thought success in my career was everything. But now, I know that the balance between career and us, that's the true prize. Emma looked at him, her eyes soft with affection. I realized it too. Love isn't always easy, but enduring the tough moments together makes it so much stronger. That evening they returned to their apartment. John took charge of the main course, a simple, comforting meal while Emma prepared the salad. In the small kitchen, they talked and laughed, the clinking of dishes and the warm food smells creating a precious domestic closeness they'd nearly lost. After dinner, they settled onto the sofa, wrapped in each other's arms. John looked down at Emma, his voice filled with commitment. I know there will be more fires to fight, but I'm not scared anymore. We rode out the storm together. Emma smiled, resting her head on his chest. I know, and I will always be right here, no matter what comes next. John closed his eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of Emma's heart syncing with his own. He understood that genuine peace wasn't the absence of pressure, but the presence of partnership, trust, and unconditional love. The next day, John returned to his office, but he was fundamentally changed. The frantic edge was gone. Colleagues noticed a difference. He was calmer, more decisive, and patiently systematic. He worked efficiently, completing tasks with focus, while also making time to send small updates and share minor moments with Emma throughout the day. That evening, they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life. John spoke quietly. I want us to remember these days, not for the struggle, but for how we chose to fight for each other. Emma nestled deeper into his embrace. I agree. Every difficulty will be a reminder of the strength of our love and the patience we found. John realized that life was a continuous series of tests, but with love, trust, and a shared commitment, any pressure could be managed. He smiled, looking toward the horizon where the last vestiges of the sunset faded into a soft violet hue. Emma gently squeezed his hand. I know we have so much life ahead, but now we know how to face it, and we're not afraid anymore. John nodded. That's right. I believe that as long as we're together, nothing is impossible. That night they talked about future plans, small dreams, and the simple things they had forgotten in the rush of work pressure. The soft, yellow light streamed through the window, creating a warm space filled with laughter and renewed faith. Before drifting off to sleep, John wrote the final words in his journal. Life is demanding, but love, patience, and partnership are the compass. With Emma, I have finally found my peace. Emma read the line, smiled, and leaned her head onto his shoulder. We move forward, John, whatever the future holds. And so, John and Emma found peace after the storm, learning to navigate challenges, balance ambition and intimacy, and cherish every simple, profound moment. The vibrant city of Chicago, bustling in the distance, bore quiet witness to two people, tested by fire, now walking a new path steadfast and full of hope.